All right, good morning, everybody. It's a fine morning here. Let's get rolling here. Just a couple housekeeping notes. If you are a patron or need some assistance with something, I am available, and you would be on the stream as well for at least your voice part. On the Patreon channel here, is shown right. Let's go on the face and live stream view. Nope. There we go. As shown right here on the Patreon chat. So if you have a question you want to articulate or start just chatting it up, let me know. This live stream is getting broadcast on YouTube, but it's mostly for the patrons. Obviously, we're going to also address YouTube questions. I put this as office hours, so it's just open access. Wherever I get some questions in, if it's from the YouTube live stream chat, or if it's obviously for the patrons as well. In here, you can post under the Patreon chat, Patreon help, and then obviously we have the YouTube chat up here as well. So let me show that. That should be showing. Doesn't look like it's showing. Oh yeah, face chat. There it is. So there is our YouTube live stream chat. So we'll be taking questions. What app is that for the chat? The app is Discord. So if you go to, I guess, discord.com, and you can download that and sign in. The UAV Tech Discord channel, if you go into the Patreon, let me post that here. I guess I can do an invite. Click into this, see how I get over to there. But I can post a invite to the Discord somewhere. Let me grab that. Notification, blah, 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 invite people. So hopefully, send, no. Hide, use copy button, edit invite link. Just give me an invite link. Generate temporary membership invite link. No, that's not what I want. Just go to the welcome page. Notification, where is it? Anyways, if you go onto any of my videos in YouTube as well, there's a link to connect to the Discord. I don't know if I click on this. I don't know what this is. Or send a server invite link to a friend. That's not exactly what I want. No, I don't need it. Never. Maximum number. No limit. There we go. Generate a link. Let's see if I can do that. Put that here in the chat. There we go. No, that's not it. That did not work. That is not the link. Let's go back in there. Try that again. Broke off as my DJI unit. The cure for that. Okay. My MMCX broke off inside my DJI unit. What's the cure for that? The cure for that is soldering. Good luck. I haven't opened up the unit to see what I would need to do on there to solder that up appropriately. But yeah, I would just open it up and see if you can solder something on. It's not going to be super easy, but yeah. All right, you're downloading the Discord app now. Great, perfect. Yeah, I can't seem to get this link. Plus, I'm live streaming over Discord as well. So what I'm going to do, since nobody's in the Discord and it seems like folks are in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop video, stop screen share. And if somebody jumps into the Discord chat, I will go ahead and start that back up again, stop streaming. Okay, so the voice chat will be there, be able to hear voice and all that jazz, but save my computer a little bit of resources here. So like I said, if you are a patron, go ahead and jump on Discord if you wanted to go kind of a one-on-one on something. That's something I really appreciate all the patrons support that I do get. So I want to try to make myself as accessible as possible. This is not my full-time job, so I'm not like Joshua Bardwell and wake up every morning and answer questions for 4 hours. I have to work. I have 2 young kids, so I'm not always accessible all the time. Try to do this nights, weekends best I can. Every day I'm doing something. But yeah, what I'd like to do is try to hold some office hours and once a week if I can, to make myself available to the patrons and also out there to address questions out in the community for folks that aren't a patron but still supporting the channel through your views. I appreciate everybody's attention to the channel and whatnot. Obviously I like to help, and hopefully you guys enjoy it, and it seems like the channel's growing, so that's pretty good. If you can click the link, it makes the YouTube, that I pasted the YouTube Studios link. I'd have to go to, I don't know how to invite. It's been such a long time since I've invited somebody to the Discord. If you go to any of my videos and scroll down in the description, there is a invitation link there that you can click, and it will take you to the Discord. I'm sure if you don't have Discord installed, it will ask you to install Discord. I'm just not sure how to, there's this create an invitation. You can hit the edit link, I don't know, copy button. It doesn't seem to make like a, oh, there we go. See if that works. There we go. See if that works as an invitation. That should work. Maybe I overcomplicated it. I don't know why it says like hide, use copy button. I don't know. You guys can't probably see that because I have it, have the screen share the other direction here. Yeah, so anyways, I was clicking, I don't know, I was overthinking it. So yeah, that should get you a link to the Discord. Check that out, and then again, pop any questions in there, or if you want to do a live voice and just ask the question because it's a lot to type, go ahead and jump on to the Patreon chat. In the meanwhile, we're going to go ahead and see what we got in the chat for the YouTube live stream here. Have you ever tuned a Texas Auton? No, I have not. So it does not fly the best in acro mode. So I think that's an octocopter, Ken Atten. Do you have a link to that thing? At the end of the day, the best advice I can give, it's the same. Pit tuning is the same principles no matter what it is. I don't care if it's a valve, a navigation on a ship, a quadcopter, it is all the same. So just at the end of the day, what you need to induce on the thing is stepped inputs. Let me see if I can go to my handy dandy little thing here. You're kind of getting to see behind the scenes a little bit here on my resource stuff for videos. So let me open this up. So you'll see this chart, and in some of my videos, hold on, let me switch it to, yeah, there we go. Oh, large view there. Oh, that's just wonderful. Nah, that's a little too much face. There we go, though. We'll go with that. So what you need to do is, to explain this in graph, what this is a immediate step response. So imagine this shows here at this spot right here, this is 0 stick. And when you go ahead and move your stick to say this is, this says 100. Let's say this is 1,000 degrees per second or whatever rotation. You're going to full stick. What this chart is showing is an immediate jump, which is not exactly what we produce because you're a lot slower than you think. So it's interesting when if you get your quad sticks and look in black box here. So I pull this up. If you go to trace template 4, I don't know if I have any, I don't have any rolls in this one. I'll have to open another one here quick. But if you go into, you can just open a black box on this, and the thing I would do for this larger quad is try to induce these step responses. So So I just tuned up this thick, right? So that's a really big quad. Let me go to this one. And what you want to do is get your quad, and you'll see in a lot of my tuning videos where I jerk left and right and all this kind of stuff. You're trying to induce this step response so that you have something to measure. So this is the roll axis. So we'll just look at the roll right here. We're doing a jerk move on the step response. So I'm, in this scenario you can see the sticks overlay right here. I'm going from 0 stick to full stick right. Well, that takes me, I'm doing it, I don't know about as fast as I can, but that takes me about 150 milliseconds. So it, takes my fingers about 150 milliseconds to move over. And you can see that time in milliseconds can be translated to hertz. If you, there's this thing in PID control where you take a real motion and just a different way to analyze it. It's almost like if you put data in Excel, right? You can just look at the data. But if you graph the data, it's easier for human consumption, right? If you graph like the stock market, right? It's easier to see the graphs than to just see all the numbers. And it's like, I don't know what trend that is. But if you graph it, then you can digest it easier. So that's the same thing when we go from milliseconds and times to hertz. That's just converting it from the time domain into the frequency domain. So 150 milliseconds is about equivalent to 7 milliseconds. And that's just simple math through a conversion. So when you see, when you do spectrographs and you run the spectrograph on any of these traces over here, you'll actually see it represents stuff in hertz frequency. So let's go back to here. It takes a little bit with my computer running, but all this live stream stuff. But anyways, if I click on this, that will put it into a spectrograph and convert it into hertz value. It's getting a little bit off subject, but that movement, that step from 0 stick here to 100% stick here, go back, get it on trace template 4, that's what this is showing. Except this is an ideal scenario for just tuning a PID controller. And this is not, I didn't make this. This is out of a book, a textbook. And this is going from 0 stick to whatever, full stick, but it's doing it instantaneously, right? Either way, your quad is moving to induce a step response. If you have too much P term, you're going to oscillate like this. If you have too much D term, you're going to be over dampened, which is this one down here. So to tune a quad, what you want to do is try to induce those step responses. And you're looking in the HD or your goggles to tune it, and you're looking for, you want to get it up to where you start to see oscillations and then bring that down to where you just stop seeing them. You want to be this critically damped condition. And there's a number of reasons why. I won't go into the details unless you guys ask me to, then I will, because I usually get on these big tangents, just like that frequency thing I just started going on. But you want to get to this critically damped conditions. That's the optimal PID tune right there. So it's not subjective, it's objective, and that's what you want your PID controller to be. If then for feel, you can make adjustments with your rates and things of that nature. It's not, obviously being over damped is okay. It's going to make it squishier, but that's not going to be as good performance in prop wash. So for any size quad you have, just get it into that, you want to induce those step moves. You can use the HD, but honestly, tuning by HD or FPV goggles is really imprecise because, first of all, it's only measuring stuff first of all, it's hard to see some of these really quick movements and see these little oscillations. Like this kind of an oscillation, man, you're not even really going to see it. You can hear it, but you got to listen. There better not be a lot of like crickets and bird noise. It is difficult to hear. You can do it that way, but it's difficult to hear. I like starting this way, broad stroke, but then I like to look at a black box to really hone in on it. If you do it through HD or FPV goggles and you tune it that way and you're happy with it, and you're like, I don't want to mess with it, but then don't. It's your quad. I don't care. It's yours. If you're happy with the tune, then that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter if I'm happy with it. But that's just some advice if you want to get a little bit more detailed on it. That's what you want to do. So on the larger quads, it's the same deal as like a micro, is just inducing those step responses. try to look for this. There is general settings that you're going to probably find that your P to D balance, like this is a differential between the P term and the D term for this overshoot versus not overshooting scenario. And what you'll find is on larger quads that your, let me hook this up, your D term will be equivalent to your P term in gain. I see that that's a general theme. So for general tuning of it, what I would do, that was nice, just connected right away, is you're going to be starting off, and if you have these sliders here for larger stuff or quads with low power to weight, first thing I would do is try to negate feed forward, because that's a whole nother term. And you're probably going to be starting off with moving this up, this slider up. And I covered this in a recent video where your P term and D term are about equivalent. So as the quad is lower power to weight, like it's heavier stuff on it, or just the motors aren't as powerful. Because for example, I was helping somebody tune a 7-inch, and it had 2205 motors on it. I think it was a 7-inch. Tri-bay plops, they were fiberglass, pretty heavy. It was actually inverted, so his D gains were actually even farther than this. It was like 100, it was like 2-to-1 on the PDD balance. That's a sign, if you're getting inverted like that, where your D gains are higher than your P gains, that's a sign that your power to weight ratio is pretty low. And you do get to a spot where it's like an airplane. If you have an airplane and you make it tail heavy, technically you can fly it if you're a pretty good pilot, but you're going to be like, this flies like shit. And that's kind of the same thing. If your power to weight ratio is really bad and you're starting to invert on the stuff, it's generally not going to fly that awesome. It'll fly. It depends what you define as awesome. For me, it's not going to fly that awesome. If you're happy with it, that's all that matters. But it's just a sign that you might want to use bigger motors. I see that as the primary issue with these 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-inch quads. We just got a larger frame, took the motors we had, put bigger props on them, but we didn't upgrade the motors in size, and they don't have enough torque. And then that's why everybody's like, oh, this 9-inch is so hard to tune. It's like, yeah, you need to invest in $35 motors and you'd be all right. So that you could see with that 9-inch tune I did with the Avenger V2 motors, those were 2812 motors. So 28 millimeters, 12 high. Those were on the 9-inch tune. Those were on the Octocopter tune. They were 30, I think they're $35 a piece. They're not too bad. And I mean, yeah, they're expensive, but they're not $50 a piece. So let me pull those up. Avenger V2. Pull those up here. That's something if you're running a larger quad, I would definitely recommend anything. I would say anything above an 8-inch, you really need to have. It's these. And you can get them here. You can see they're right here. So that was just the bell up top. Yeah, so $33 a pop from Brother Hobby. I've seen these on a couple quads now, and they work really well on the larger quads. So if you're having issues with your larger quad, check those out. But that's hopefully that addresses that question with the tuning. It's kind of an offbeat kind of quad. It's the same processes we've shown in all the other videos, just implementing those the same. What you'll see here in the upcoming video, part 2 for this quad we did, the Octocopter, I even applied the filter strategy of turning off all the low pass filters. So let's give you guys a little preview of that. This is what the higher P. Oh, I think I have this opened already. Yeah, I do. So if I'll bring that over and let that run. Let me read here in the Discord for a second, but or the channel, take a look at that, and then yeah, we got a Patreon chat on here. But if you look in there, I'll be showing how I turned off the low pass filters on Gyro, and it still worked fine. So this the concept of reducing your low pass filters on your gyro signal, not your D term, is applicable for all quad classes because they just don't do that much on the gyro. So it saves some latency. All right, let's go to the next one here. Notice that the thick tune, you use bi-blade props. I'm using tri-blade props, which work great for me. Do you find bi-blade props are any advantage? No, I would say no. I like the tri-blade props better. In that scenario with the thick, first you have 8 motors, right? So it's just prop area. So when you go tri-blade, obviously your battery life is going to go down. Bi-blades on larger quads generally are going to be noisier. They're going to have more vibrations. They're going to be more fragile, and they're not going to fly as well. And you can get good bi-blades. From the larger quads, I see people struggle with the props in general. I think a fairly safe bet is HQ props. I'm not saying they're great. I'm not saying the HQ are the best. I'm saying they're good, so that they're a good baseline. Those bi-blades were the HQ on there. The noise level on those were very decent. So I would check those out if you're going to check out bi-blades. If you're on tri-blades, I would stay on tri-blades. I like the HQ tri-blades a lot better. The tips on those bi-blades were pretty fragile. So if you nick the ground at all, they're gonna break, and then it starts to oscillate a little bit or give you jello. I found that the tri-blades work a little bit better. Tri-blades are more expensive though too. I had tri-blades in the pack that they sent me, but the guy that sent the quad was kind of worried. He actually was making it for somebody else. Quad Standard Labs was making it for somebody else. He wanted me to help him out tune it, and he was concerned a little bit. He's like, "Yo, just be easy on the tri-blades. They're kind of expensive," and they are. And I was like, well, I'll just do it on the bi-blades, and that's fine. So I had them, but I didn't put them on. I did the 9-inch tune, same Avenger motors, same APD ESCs, actually same owner of the quad, ultimately, end user. And those tri-blades worked really well. So if you're on the tries, I would stick with them. If you would try out bi-blades, maybe HQs, give those a look. Thanks for all you do. I'm currently working on getting disability. Thanks. Yeah, anybody that provides some support, I appreciate it. Yeah, the Patreon thing, it means a lot. There's, in the YouTube world, I love doing this stuff, but there's some days when there's a lot going on, and just the kind words on the comments in the YouTube videos, and the Patreon support. There's ups and down days, and some of the down days, it helps a lot to keep, let's just keep moving along with this, because it's a lot of work. It's definitely a lot of work. Late nights, and you're always working on something with it. Betaflight uses all the hardware filter features of the ICM Gyro. So is Betaflight using all the hardware features in the ICM Gyro? I'm not sure I have a great grasp of all the hardware features on the ICM Gyro. It's using the digital low pass filter. That's the biggest feature, but there is some other stuff in the ICM Gyros. I've talked to one of the devs about one of them. The problem is when it goes through that additional processing in the ICM Gyro that is available with the TDK, which is the overarching gyro manufacturer for like MPU gyros, ICM gyros. They're all made by TDK. That's the owner of the company that makes those gyros. Those other features add a lot of latency to the data for real time. We got to keep in mind that, this gyro chip on here, TDK doesn't make that for us. TDK makes those gyros for this. This is their market. And GoPro and all these other things that use gyros. We are nothing to them in a industry. So the data processing and all these other things, like your cell phone, doesn't need it to be that fast. So there's other features. I guess don't get There may be other features. As far as I'm aware, the only thing it utilizes, any firmware utilizes, is the digital low pass filter in the gyro. I think all the other things add latency. There is some, I would say, if there's something in there that you think is valuable, maybe bring it up in the Betaflight Slack. The devs know a lot about this kind of stuff, and don't get how do I want to say this? You'll hear things about like AI and wireless meshes, and AI is the next big thing that's going to be in the hobby. Or all these tantalizing little marketing things. Don't get, they're interesting, but have some skepticism, because some of the stuff that goes around, it's BS. And, it's marketing and things of that nature. So there could be some stuff that people are saying, oh, we use these features in the gyro. It's like, oh, really? Which ones? And then we can bring that kind of stuff up. I guess there's some healthy bit of skepticism in the hobby is good, I've found. So hopefully that addresses that. Just stopping by to say hi. How you doing? Crunk UAV Tech referred. Paste and then recommended 3. All right, let me keep going here. So we got a Patreon here. Okay, so a Patreon question. Does anybody have some Betaflight configs 4.2 for a Delta Diatone GT 349? This is a 3-inch. Just download Betaflight 4.2. So let me pull this up. I think you made somebody was asking about that before, and I don't have a specific tune, but I can give you some advice. Let me pull this quad up because I'm not remember it. 349. I'll assume this is it. Okay, so the Diatone 349. So yeah, all right. So a 3-inch. I don't have a specific tune, but I can give you some general advice. General advice would be, I think the defaults should apply pretty darn good on it. Most of the toothpicks in 3 inches I have flown, the defaults are pretty close because the power to weight ratio is kind of really close to a 5-inch. You won't need to adjust. I would probably turn off D-min. You're probably looking, I would do something similar to this for the setup. I usually would set feed forward transition to 0 as well. And I would go with this for your just out of the box and see how it runs. It should run pretty good. What you can do then is just try to cheat this down a little bit. You always want to keep cheating down the PDD balance. See if you get oscillations or a flutter on a sharp stick movement. If you're getting bounce back, that's that. As you cheat this slider down, you're going from maybe over-damped through critically damped into an under-dampened condition, right? And once you start to see that, oh, I'm getting oscillations, that's how you know you've gone too far. So then you bring that slider back up 1 or 2 notches, and that should tell you. You almost have to go beyond where, in pit tuning, you almost have to make it bad so you know where to then dial it back 1 notch to make it right where it needs to be. So you don't just keep cheating this down until you get oscillations and whatnot, and then cheat it back up. After you have that kind of squared away, the next thing you would do is just keep cheating this PD gain slider up on your 3-inch, right? And it's going to vary. It's going to vary on your props, but I don't have a diatone for you, so this is the best advice I can give. Just keep cheating this up, and eventually you'll get oscillations. Like I just showed in that video with that 8-inch where it had that fluttery sound. As soon as you get to that, then bring this back at least 2 notches, maybe even 3, because there's when you hear the flutters, there's actually a spot where it's fluttering, but you can't hear it until you got up to that spot. If you'd look in black box, you would see what I'm talking about. Once you'd hear the flutters, you'd look at that in black box, move it back 1, you'd still see flutters in black box, but you wouldn't hear them. And so, but if you come back 2 or 3, that would get you to where you need to be. With these other settings, I would just leave this default. I would probably turn off D-min and just anti-gravity. I'd set that to 5. Filter setup, I would probably do this. This is the filter setup I had on that octocopter. I would just turn off your low pass filters on the gyro, set up your, if you have RPM filtering set up, which it should, and then this could probably be higher, maybe 125 min, and this could probably be 125, just for a little bit boosted up. I'd have that down because with the octocopter, bigger props, the frequencies go lower. But that, I bet you, would give you a pretty decent flying quad. Check it out. I don't have a default for you, obviously, as a patron or whatnot. If you want to take a log of it or some HD, want some help, let me know. We can take a look at it in a little bit, or whenever you're going through the tune on it. Yeah, 20 up for anti-gravity is crazy. Crunk. You're right. It is cray. But I wanted to try it. So there's interesting, if you go, and this will come up in probably the Patreon video this week, we're going to talk about how do you tune anti-gravity, because you can definitely go too far. And what does that look like? And it actually induces bounce back in your, or the nose bobble when you're hitting the throttle. It will induce it versus help subside. It doesn't help all that. Anti-gravity is mostly for nose wander, so that if you go up, kill the throttle, sometimes your quad will wander on either yaw or pitch or roll a little bit, and that's where anti-gravity is. When you get that, when you pump the throttle, and Crunk knows all this stuff, but for the live stream stuff, Crunk, he's a gentleman that helps a lot of people with tuning on the Discord, so he's a really helpful guy, knows his stuff, so he knows all this stuff. But when you get those fast bobbles, like when you're pumping the throttle and whatnot, that's a P-term issue. And that goes back to why it's important to have this critically damped, because you need as much P-term as you can have without having this oscillation. So this fundamental of having this critically damped, like there's so many aerodynamic issues we're trying to make better, right? Like nose bobble, prop wash, when you pump off the throttle and it wanders around, all these symptoms that people want their tunes to be better for, that the base foundation of that is having your PID controller provide a critically damped response. Number one key. The next key, for mostly prop watch specifically, is having your filter latency as low as it can be without your motors being too hot or things of that nature. So what I found, again, is a good way to chop off a ton of latency is to just take all these low pass filters. They don't do that much. The D-term ones are definitely needed, and I covered that in the last Patreon video. So if you want some details on why the low pass filters specifically are so critical on the D-term, like why from a flight dynamics, from a PID tune fundamentals, that's important, it's because of how the D-term magnifies motion at higher frequencies and how the low pass filter kind of counters that, so it flatlines it. Check out that video. Obviously, it's a Patreon release one. But this is the number one way I found to, and others have found to cut a bunch of latency off. Obviously, what's happening here then is your gyro, your notch filters on the gyro are handling almost all the peak vibrations and crushing them down. And then this kind of just smooths things out. So then you can just use this slider to, pick your smoothness level. Obviously, you don't want to be, if you're bringing this way down, that's going to be a decent amount of latency. There's probably, if you're setting up your quad in this fashion with this setup right here, and it's, doing a flyaway or bad vibrations, there's a mechanical thing that you would really want to take a look at. And the number one thing is just the props. And I found Gen Fan props, some are good, some are bad. In general, I found HQ to be all around decent. Sometimes Gen Fan beats HQ. Sometimes DAL breaches HQ. But there's some of those, Gen Fan specifically, I have found that some are duds. And they're bad vibrations. And I don't know if it's just a batch of them or whatnot. But generally, I've For example, I had a 2.5 inch from the factory from iFlight. Was their 120 RS. The props they shipped it with, horrible. I would send it for review. I like Patrick over at iFlight. He's a good guy. And he was like, hey, review this. It's our new thing. Okay, great. I flew it. I'm like, this thing flies like shit. And so I kind of held off on the review, and I was like, I got to fix this. And other YouTubers found the same thing. I got some HQ 65mm props on there. Flies like a dream. It was just the props. Props were bad, and they had the gem fan. So it was the iFlight 120 RS. So it was those props right there on that Dell. Yeah, you can see it here. Let's see if I can just zoom in. I don't really want to click the link. It came with these props, these tri-blades. Flew like garbage. These though, you can see these other YouTubers did the same thing. They put on these HQ props, and maybe it comes with those now. Flew awesome after that. Now it comes with those. So it's interesting to me though too, because I don't see how that necessarily occurs. Like, didn't they fly it at the factory? Like, I don't know how that happens. But nevertheless, props. It's all about the props. Let's go to the next one. Get more lacing reduced by increasing your Q factor. Yeah, so next question is, I think you get more latency reduction by increasing the Q factors, particularly in the RPM notches. I forget the exact amount, but going to 1,000 saves a lot of latency. So let's talk about that, because that's a thing, and it does save latency. But pound for pound, nothing like the low passes. So if you're not familiar, I have this filter calc tool, because 2 years ago, when I started getting really heavy into tuning, there wasn't a lot of information out there on filter delay, so I was really interested in that. So let's just break this down. I've talked about this in other videos, but you can see this here, and this is set up specifically on the math. So this it's important to understand what the filtering that Betaflight uses in any firmware filter. This filtering tech, or the filtering equations and the fundamentals behind it. I need to change the view here. The filtering equations and the fundamentals behind it were, that was great. I was showing you guys websites you couldn't even see. That's awesome. I'm an awesome live streamer. I'm really good. Nobody even commented. Yeah. Anyways, but the filtering equations that we're using, in some cases, in the last in the last Patreon video, I showed how the low pass filter, the PT1 filter equation. It's a very simple equation. Even the notches, all these other stuff, we're not inventing. Nobody in this industry is inventing new filter equations. That stuff is done at like university level. I'm sorry, but we're just not. Guys in their hobby spare time or these small businesses are just not doing this. This stuff has been invented for a long time. All we're doing is implementing it. So there is lots of books on the filters. If you're really interested in geeking out, I have them all. Filter fundamental equations. If you go to tiny.cc/UAV tech, go to this filter fundamental equations. I even have my markups in here. If you go to, I think it's this one, analog filters. Yeah, I think it's this one. That could be chapter 4. You click on both of those a while. But those go through how the filters work, the latency associated with them. So here, like these are the fundamental filters we are using. These are the transform equations, how they work with the poles. It's very complicated stuff from a design standpoint. But the equations for a low pass filter are very simple. For example, let me go up to a low pass. See if they have it here. I can't remember. They don't have the actually. They only have the transform equation in here. I'll bring it up here in a second. I actually have it here. So let's break this down a little bit when it comes to, I guess, the dynamic notch. We'll turn that off. We'll turn on our RPM filters. And then we'll turn on one low pass filter here. So if you look at, now we're looking at a low pass filter, one low pass filter at 250 hertz versus these RPM filters. So these are RPM. These are 3 harmonics. You can see that the total delay down in the control frequencies, it really matters right in here. This prop wash band, this yellow band. But you can see it's the same, 0.7, 0.7, 0.6, 0.6. So that's 0.7, 0.7, and 0.6 milliseconds of latency. That's how far it's offsetting the signal. But they're about the same, but this is at 250 hertz. So if I bring this down to 200 hertz, you can see, and a lot of times we'll have a low pass down at, classically 100 hertz. You can see the notches, all three RPM notches are 0.7. They add up to 0.7, whereas a one low pass filter, a PT1, which is not even that strong, down at 100 hertz, 1.6 milliseconds, so it's a lot more. And you can see the attenuation strength. So this is how much the low pass filter will cut down on the signal. You can see how the notches come down, and as long as they're centered right on top of where the vibration is, it will completely crush it out to 0, where the low pass will go like 0.3 to 0.1% of it. So not percent. So it'd be the amplitude of whatever the vibration is, you'd multiply by 0.3 or 0.1, and that's what you would get as an end result. So it would shrink it down. So it would bring it down to 10% of that, 30% of that, 20% of the full amplitude, where the notch will bring it down to 0. That's what's awesome about the notches. Also, notice here how the latency on the notch for a low pass filter, as you go down in the control frequency, so you're 100 hertz and down is where like prop washes from 50 to 100, and then down here is where we're moving the sticks around. Notice how a low pass filter latency goes up, 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 where a notch, it actually comes down as it gets towards the control frequencies. So it kills noise better, and the phase delay goes in the delay that it causes goes into it's going a better direction. So you were saying about, does it, if I bring these up from 500 is the default Q, so you can go into the CLI. And what he's talking about here is you can go into the CLI. Now this is more advanced stuff, so it's, I don't get into this a lot because then I would get into the Betaflight's too complicated thing. And Betaflight's as complicated as you want to make it, but you don't need to do this stuff if you don't want to. So you can get RPM. And you can see in here there's this Q value right here. Make sure you're looking at gyro RPM. There's actually RPM notches that you could use on the D term, but they're not active since the harmonic is 0 by default, and nobody ever really turns them on. They might get removed, I'm not sure. But you can change this variable from 500 up to 1,000. And what that can do here is, if you see, if I bring this up to 1,000, that will take that 0.7 down to 0.3. Now, what that does is it makes it more narrow, right? But if you look, what's a little tricky here is that this is simulating all three, or this is simulating all 4 notches right on the same spot. And actually they're moving around to track each motor individually. So if you move that up, people run this way. It does decrease the latency, but what we have on by default is, let me back this up. See if now I have the math in here again. Okay. What we have on by default is, so this is what, 1.1? So 0.5 plus 0.6, 1.1. This is 0.7. So if I bring this up to 1,000, that goes down to 0.3. So 7,654. So 0.4. You can drop off 1.1 by turning these off. Now this assumes you're at a filter multiplier of 1.0. Obviously, if you're moving this up to 1.5, it's going to vary. But you can kind of see the differences there, right? What I would suggest is if you reduce the Q you might see some noise, more noise going to the D term because those notches are going to get more narrow, so more kind of leaks around the edges. Because although they're getting the signal from the motors of the RPM data, that actually has to go through a low pass filter because the signal is pretty noisy. Actually, I have that up here. So let's, yeah, right here. So if I go to trace setup 6, go to here, turn off smoothing. If you do a debug on your quad of, what's the debug? It's RPM. Yeah, this debug mode, these D-shot RPM telemetry, that will actually give you the eRPM data that's Betaflight is getting back from the ESCs. And you can see in some spots, now I zoomed way out. At some spots, it's nice and smooth, but at some spots, it's pretty noisy, right? And so to smooth that out, we put it through a low pass filter, which for all intents and purposes this is not the exact same thing. But if I turn on smoothing in black box, it kind of shows what that low pass filter does. It smooths out the data so that the notches aren't jumping around so much. That low pass filter that it smooths out the data, that by default is at 150 hertz. So that low pass filter from the data coming in from the ESCs delays the notches, so it's always kind of behind the RPM data by 1.1 milliseconds. Now you can adjust that if you want. That low pass filter right here. RPM notch low pass filter. That's what that is. You can see that it defaults 150 hertz. So you can go from 100 up to 500 hertz. Obviously, if you move that up in frequency, then the data is going to be a little bit more noisy. So that's essentially equivalent to going into these traces. And if I hold down, if I hold down Control and hover over a trace, I can kind of take some of the smoothing away. So I think by default, the smoothing here is at least is at 25. Now I can't get to 25 again. But as you increase that frequency, it's basically doing that, something like that, if you wanted to visualize it. It's making it a little bit more noisy, but it's reducing the delay. So as you increase this Q, those notches are more narrow, and you got to keep in mind that the data is, we're trying to follow the RPM data. We're delayed by 1.1 milliseconds, which is pretty close. It's pretty tight. It's the tightest way we know how, unless somebody has a better idea, to track the motor peak noise. But it's still delayed by 1.1 milliseconds just because of that low pass filter. So that's, if you're out in the field and just want to play with some stuff, that's something you could play with. It's still better than the dynamic notch. The dynamic notch was our primary peak noise killer before RPM, and that has to take the gyro signal. It has to do this FFT thing, which is basically like going into black box, and it's like 2 logs of the same thing. It's basically like going into black box and clicking one of these trace templates or these trace setups here, and it does this spectrograph. So what the dynamic notch is doing is it's bringing in the gyro data. It's running a continuous fast Fourier transform, which is basically the same thing that this is when you click on a trace and it runs a spectrograph. It finds where the peak is. This quad doesn't really have any peak noise. It finds where a peak is, and you can see right here, and it puts the notch there. That process, based on, if I can recall correctly, when we were looking at this in detail, takes about 20 to 25 milliseconds. So taking 25 milliseconds to following peaks around, and it was only one peak. So it's wherever the peaks were is the summation of all the different motors. And reducing that down to 1.1 millisecond, it means that the notches were a lot more accurate than the dynamic notch. And obviously we could track all 4 independently, which is another advantage. So hopefully you can see there with, you can kind of calc out and see what the different variables are what I've kind of found is that if you turn off the low pass filters on the gyro, you don't really see that much more noise on your quad. They just don't do that much. So I think that's the best way. I have tried moving up the Q on some quads that were fairly clean, and I saw more noise come in. So do it either way, but I think my general advice is still going to stick with, I would recommend turning off these low pass filters versus moving this Q up. There's another thing in filter issues. You know, why do we have the Q at 500 versus 1,000 or some higher number? Once you go up above 100 in the Q and you go up towards 1,000, the filter itself can induce noise. Just like I showed, maybe this is the best way to articulate this. As a notch moves around, believe it or not, it can induce, it's basically like a step response. Without getting into too much detail on it, which I could, but as you move the Q up, you can get into a scenario where you'll get this oscillations in the signal because the notch is moving. Now, one way to do that is to arrest that is slow the notch down, which we don't want to do. It's already slowed down some. But another way to do that, and we've looked at some code on this, is as the notch is moving, increase the Q. But as the notch is more stationary, as the notch is moving, decrease the Q. And as the notch is more stationary, bring the Q back up. We looked at that a number of ways. The gentleman that was looking at Jack, he never pulled all the code together. You're really getting down the rabbit hole on it. But you do have to be cautious about that. As you move that Q up to 1,000, you could start to see where you're inducing noise just because of the filter moving around itself. That's why we settled on 500. Anything below 500, you're pretty safe. Anything above 500, I would say up to like 750, 800, you're probably fine. Once you're going above 800, you can start to see that in some quads, not in all, so you might be fine. I know a number of people do run the Q on the RPM filters up at 1,000. Okay. Discussion about the filter, blah, blah, blah. See, is there any other Patreon stuff? Let's pop back over there. Oh, now we got Crunk down there. He's doing my work for me. Yep, up 38. Okay, good. Boom, down. Sure it'd be. Oh, there we go. Crunk's helping him out. He's got a, it looks like he's got one of these diatones. Good. All right. Well, if you guys need anything, jump into the chat. Let me know. All right. What else we got here for questions? Lowering the P term along with it just makes it feel a lot more sloppy. So what are you saying? That's the thing. Hi, Christoph. How are you doing? Yeah, experience is everything. Yeah. Well, that's where I think logging can help people a lot, because then you can quantize stuff. It's hard to PID tune. It's hard to know what to look for just in the field. You have to have some experience behind it. Whereas a log, you can kind of quantify, look at a video, that kind of a thing. Now I feel I can change my props. There you go. D-term, my motors feel comfortable. Okay. All right, what other questions? Tuning my Mobula 7 frame with 1102 motors, small amount of absolute control, 3 or less, helps lock the yaw from wandering, but I don't know why. How's this different from I term and P term? So absolute control is, and he's talking about, my flight controller is going to reboot. But absolute control is basically like a faster iTerm. I gotta unplug this and plug it back in. All right, so he's talking about right here, absolute control right here. So Joe Lucet, the inventor of the RPM filter and the same guy that brought iTerm Relax into Betaflight, which is huge. It's a PID clamping, iTerm clamping fundamental and PID control. That was a big ad. That's significant. Even more than feed forward, I think, is this iTerm clamping, bringing that into the mix. That was a huge deal to just address all the iTerm bounce back issues and allow us to not be so constrained with I gains because of the bounce back problem. The bounce back problem that you get from iTerm is compounded when you don't have something like feed forward or D-term kick, because it winds up because your quad can't follow your quick stick movements to do a sharp flip or a roll. But anyways, absolute control, what that does is if you move your sticks up and the quad's not tracking it and it's kind of offset, so there's a little bit of weight to it. Generally, iTerm will wind up to bring the quad up to follow the sticks. This is for like a general imbalance, right? So then if the imbalance goes another direction, then iTerm will, wind down and it will let it come back down to it. Again, this is like a general imbalance. And that general imbalance, what I'm talking about is like the battery on the bottom. It's almost like a pendulum, right? So if that pendulum's quite kind of off center or whatnot, your quad will want to lean like that to balance the pendulum. To balance the pendulum. iTerm will provide that force to correct that. What absolute control does is it kind of helps iTerm, because it will, instead of having iTerm wind up, it will just make this correction in the sticks. So it will be like, and I don't have my transmitter with me here, it will be like instead of iTerm correcting it, it would just be like you just holding the stick over a little bit. Now, it's not you actually holding the stick over, because absolute control is just doing it. It just takes the error and pushes it back into the set point. So why did Joe do that? Because he could make it faster without altering the fundamental of iTerm. I mean, you could theoretically goof around with iTerm, not in Betaflight, because I'm sure the core devs would not let him, but theoretically, for your own project, you could alter iTerm at a fundamental level. That's kind of what absolute control does. It's just a different way around it. Like, I won't alter iTerm by halving its response time or something like that. I will just take the error and push it back into the set point so the sticks move. The higher you have the absolute control gain here, the faster it pushes that error back into the sticks. And then iTerm, since there is no error, because the sticks are actually adjusting for it, then iTerm really doesn't do all that much. So I'm speculating what you're seeing here. Again, I don't have my screen showed. Horrible at this. Talking about absolute control right here. I'm speculating what you're seeing is that it's helping you because it's just reacting faster to your yaw twitches. What I would offer to check out is that your P term on I might just be too low. So whoops, and I think that's what you were looking at. Well, yeah, Mobula 7. I think I have a Mobula 7. Yeah, Mobula 7, the 1S, 2S thing. They need high yaw authority as well. So you should be looking at your yaw P term being at like 100, and same thing for the I term. So when you look at the yaw command, it's just so different because it doesn't have a thrust component. It's all based on inertia, that you just really need a high amount of authority. The PID controller needs a high amount of authority on it over the two other axes. And that's something I don't think people are... We're going to touch on that in this next video again, part 2 for that octocopter, is there's this balance between, right, the P term and the D term when it comes to this damping condition here, right? This thing we're talking about. That's just on one axis. Oh man, I closed that image. That was I'll have to go open it again if I need it. There's also a balance between the roll, pitch, and yaw axis, because all these are fighting for priority in the mixer. So if you're doing a roll and you're seeing that that is causing your pitch axis to hop or your yaw axis to yaw because you're inducing a roll, that means your roll axis, these gains across the top here, are having too much priority in the mixer. So there's two options. You either reduce the access gains for roll, or you increase the access gains for the bad behavior access, whichever that is. A lot of times it's yaw. You'll do yaw. You'll do a roll, and you'll see the yaw axis kind of twitch and move over. It's because your yaw axis isn't receiving enough priority in the mixer for sending the motors out. So you don't really want to reduce your yaw, your roll axis PIDs, like in general, like lower them all. I wouldn't recommend doing that because again, you want to get to that critically damped condition on that specific, axis. And then you want to move these gains up until you get to the oscillations and then bring it down a little bit. And then that's it. Keep it there. If you want more authority than on the yaw, it's typically a yaw that you have the issue. Increase the PIDs on the yaw, and then that will start to arrest any weird behavior you get on the yaw. If absolute control is working for you, I think it's probably another way to skin it. But I think at a core PID level, you can address it that way as well. And I do have to admit, the concept of KISS, when I started using KISS, there's not much in it, and Crunk loved KISS. Is he still here? Crunk, give a good shout out for KISS. I know you love the KISS. What I have noticed in KISS is, since there's not much in there, you have the PIDs, P, I, and D, that's it. You have a D set point weight, and you have a filter thing. It's high, medium, and low. God knows what that means for the low pass filters. I'm sure it just uses low pass filters, but I have no idea what hertz value it's setting it. And they're trying to keep it simple. By keeping it simple, when it comes to flight dynamics stuff, there it is. Come on, tell people you love the KISS. I know you love the KISS. It's decent. There you go. It keeps your focus on the PIDs because there's not all these other bells and whistles to mess with. Now where I think that's good. Where I depart is people are like, well, it's better. It's like, no, Betaflight has PIDs too. You can still do the same thing. It's just, I think sometimes we get distracted by the other stuff, which I think can help, and it makes Betaflight a broader tool for, octocopters down to whoops. You have all these tools in the toolbox, but you got to get your core PIDs squared. Like, don't just get distracted. I'm not saying it's bad to use absolute control or all these other stuff, but I wouldn't focus more energy on those than I would on making sure my PID controller gains are as good as I know how to get them first. It's always filters, PIDs, and then the other stuff. And that's where you can start bringing in dynamic idle. You got to realize the guys that are adding these tools to Betaflight, they know how to PID tune. They're not watching a UAV tech video and learn how to PID. They know. So they're beyond the PID stuff. They're trying to take it, okay, the PID controller has certain constraints. I can't get it to be any better. I wonder if I do this. Fundamentally, if I do this, X, Y, and Z, does that make it, should that improve flight dynamics? And then they share it and chat about it. And yeah, it sounds like it's a good idea. And then they'll do some tests and they'll show in logging it does make it better. And that's how it gets into beta flight. Nothing that gets into beta flight that I've ever seen doesn't have a healthy dose of scrutiny applied against it. Sometimes that makes people mad at the key devs, the core devs, but I think it's good. I think science should, and flight dynamics should have a healthy dose of criticism. And if you can get through that criticism, then that means you actually have something. But hopefully that helps out, Brandon. KISS is good. FX2 beta flight is complicated. Yeah. That's what they all say. I struggle with that. Go ahead and change some BL heli settings on your F1 flight controller or your Falco X flight controller and tell me how uncomplicated that is, because it has no PL heli pass-through. So you have to like flash back to clean flight and then do the thing and then flash back over, and my goodness, that's complicated. So, all right, any other questions here? I guess we are beyond the hour. Let's see if there's any Patreon stuff. Nobody jumped on. Hopefully the patrons are punch outs, flips, rolls, better, data. Yeah, there you go, buddy. All right, any other questions in there? If not, so Flight 1 uses that. Yeah, Flight 1 doesn't use AI, come on. Look, I'm not gonna say that, I can guarantee Flight 1 is not using AI right now. So here's the telltale sign. AI needs trained. Yeah, it is lame. So AI needs trained. So there's a thing on my Discord. I'll pull this up. So Drone Mesh, you might have seen, he's a YouTuber. He's working on, there's this thing called Neuroflight. He's picked up that ball and he's moving forward with it best they can. But they're working through the training part of it right now. Do you ever hear of a what is that device called? It's probably in that chat, where you make this really complicated thing to do this very simple process. What is that called? Somebody in the chat help me out with that. I can't remember the name now. I keep wanting to say Dunning-Kruger, but that's not what it is. Dunning-Kruger is where you know a little bit, but you think you know a lot, or more than everybody else. There's a lot of Dunning-Kruger in our hobby as well, but the Rube Goldstein, Rube Golds. I can't remember the name. What is it? Rube Goldberg machine. That's it. So here's where I'm at with the AI thing that we're about to, Goldberg. Yeah, thank you. All this AI talk, first of all, if it's, the guys at Flight 1 are there to sell, and I feel okay about this because they really trash on the Betaflight guys, and it drives me crazy because it's just not warranted. They don't need to do that. You don't need to pick yourselves up by putting other people down. That's what Helio did, and look where it got them. You just don't need to do that. So then the guys are all volunteers. They don't need this. I mean, yeah, they get free flight controller boards, and so do YouTubers. So yeah, the Betaflight devs, they get some free gear from stuff to add and support some of the equipment in, but it's not like that's their day job. So anyways, and when you make YouTube channels or YouTube videos about your AI, and then you say something like, I just learned that the D term is really a problem for noise amplification, that doesn't give me a lot of confidence that you're going to make AI work. I mean, come on. So AI, maybe they will, but is it a Rube Goldberg device where it could be done a lot more simpler than an AI? I think that's the thing even in this mesh flight. So I made this channel just to help out with it. If AI, I think the PID controller is a pretty simple, as I just showed in that, I think, PID controller for dummies, just trying to make it a provocative title to attract some views or whatnot. But it's a pretty simple thing. And it works really well. I mean, our quads fly. If you have really good mechanical, they fly really good. Almost no prop wash. You know, things are at this level that if you have a good mechanical, it's pretty good. So can AI do better? I don't know. I don't think so. It's not going to be able to predict anything because there's nothing. The only thing it'd be able to predict is when you move your stick, that it knows what you're going to do before you even input it. Good luck with that. And man, that could really. I hope it knows if it does know what I'm going to do before I do it. I hope it gets it right and doesn't just like start to fly away. So I don't know about that. I think the silver lining for AI though is once you have the AI would need to go through a gym to teach it and set up the algorithms. So basically it's just the computer setting up the PID algorithms by itself. And they might come out and look different or something where it's one of those things that you ever look at like super complicated math and then you can actually reduce that down to like two numbers adding together. You know, just because it's super complicated doesn't mean it's any different than just adding two numbers together. That's the Rube Goldberg thing. So you can have this really long math that's complicated. And it's like, wait, it's just these two things. It's like, well, just do these two things. So I think the AI will come up with a super complicated solution that is very damn similar to the PID controller. I don't know that's necessarily better. However, once that core is put onto your quad, which first there's got to be gym training, and if you don't see some of these signs through somebody saying something's working on AI, that means it's probably not AI. It's something else. And then when you put it on your quad, you shouldn't need to tune anymore. It should automatically adjust. More importantly, there should be some mechanism so that as it's learning your quad, you can export some sort of file from your quad because obviously you'd want to save that because you just are training this AI as you're flying the track or whatever, as you're doing your freestyle and it's getting to know your specific quad. So there should be some export mechanism to save that AI for that quad, right? Because that's almost like it's custom tuned. Moreover, then when you drastically change the quad, like, I don't know, put on different pitch props, change the battery weight a lot, do something drastic, it should go from, you should see it progressively start to fly better than the stock AI put on it. Then when you change something drastic, you should see it gets much worse. Not worse than it initially was. You should see it get worse. And then you should see that over time get better again, back to where it was. If it does all that and it's all behind closed doors, that's AI. Then I believe that's AI. If it is, all behind closed doors and has none of those characteristics, there's no talk about training on a gym. There's no way to export your custom AI machine learning thing. It doesn't seem to progressively get better over time. And then if you shift things, it then gets worse and then progressively gets better again. Then it's just not really AI. There's a lot of marketing stuff out there, so a healthy dip of skepticism is good. I think the drone mesh thing is different. That's an open source thing, so they're already taking Neuroflight and working on it. They didn't release their source code of their tweaks to Neuroflight back up into GitHub yet, but they're doing that. And there's a little, obviously with open source projects, there's complete transparency, so you don't have to. I mean, the skepticism's still good, but at least you can just go in and see it for your own self. So I wouldn't get too caught up in the AI thing just yet, but I hope it pans through. Auto tuning quads would be awesome. All right, any other questions? Yeah, I see his message. I'll have to get him. I don't want to. That's a private message, so I don't want to. I don't know what he said. I don't want to throw it. I guess I could put it over here. See if it's a question. He's actually sending me a quad to take a look at. So let me bring up here. Oh, great. Maybe I prefer communication. Yeah. All right. Yeah. No, that's just a question to me. Nothing specific. All right. Any other questions out there? I can hang out for another 15 minutes. Error cloud data collection. Yeah. Yeah, the training on the gym, that's a pretty big obstacle to overcome. Talking to, I don't even know the guy's name, Drone Mesh. I don't know what his name is, unfortunately. He's running through thousands and thousands of flight simulations on the gym. That means like thousands of flights. So that's the other thing with the AI training itself on your quads flying. Like if you have to run through thousands of iterations, that means thousands of flights on your quad. Your equipment will fail. It's got to train faster than that. So there's some significant hurdles to overcome. But hey, there's smart people out there. What Sims do I play? I don't play any Sims. If you mean like flight sims for, the computer flying and practicing stuff, they're just, I don't know if I'm not doing it right, but they don't seem realistic enough to me. And honestly, half of the reason I fly is so I can be outside and doing stuff. So I'm like, you know what? With whoops and everything now, I'm like, instead of flying this stupid computer that I sit at all day for work, how about I just go actually fly? So I don't fly any. I think they are great practice. I'm probably missing out, but I don't fly any. I guess I need to, I would think, invest in, what's the one with Bardwell's house? But that one, that would seem like a pretty decent one. I've heard a lot of good things about it. Have you had the opportunity to fly Flight 1 on the new H7? No, I have not. It's going to be the same. A faster processor doesn't mean anything with this stuff. We're talking about filter delay of 1.1 microseconds. A PID loop at 8K is, or 1.1 milliseconds of delay. PID loop runs at 125 microseconds. So the delay in the filters is literally 1,000 times more important. Your PID loop's running thousands of times faster than your filter delay. So the speed of how fast the PID loop runs doesn't really make a difference. Anything above, well, I actually showed in the last video, or no, it was the Patreon video again, that once you go to like 1K, your filter delay actually gets less. So I'm starting to think maybe that's the KISS thing. I know Crunk's sitting at his desk going, yes! But I started looking at 1K a long time ago. There's something to that. People aren't crazy for flying quads at 1K sampling rate. It seems like the filter delay goes less. Here, let me give you a little preview. So if you go into my Excel spreadsheet here, this talks about, in the last video I had, we talked about the PID loop, P term, D term. In the Patreon video release of this, we added on the D term filter to show like the bright yellow here is the D term reaction, but when you add the filter onto it, you can see how it delays the signal, right? And it reduces the amplitude. So at a 8K sampling rate, we're looking at 60 hertz motion, right? That's like prop wash. That's basically, most prop washes around like 45 to 65 hertz. If you're got a really tuned in, you can get up to 80. I've never seen anything above 80. Might exist, I've just never seen it. Just this is a noise amplitude, just how, this is a sinusoidal curve we have here, just simulated. P gain, D gain, and then this is a low pass at 60 hertz. So you can see when we have a D term low pass filter at 100 hertz, it's actually attenuating some of the motion, the prop wash motion, down at 65 hertz. So although your cutoff for your low pass filter is at 100 hertz, on a PT1 filter, that the roll off from the cutoff back to zero, not attenuating the motion at all, is pretty shallow. So it actually attenuates some all the way back to 65 hertz when your cutoff's at 100. Now, if this is at 150, you can see it it doesn't here. Now this is just a single low pass filter. You can even see at 150 it does something. By the way, this is the low pass filter equation for PT1. That's how simple it is. It's the last bit of gyro data plus the filter coefficient or the cutoff coefficient, which I'll show here in a second, although also simple math, times the next gyro sample data minus the last. That's it. That's a PT1 filter equation. It's that simple. And this is the coefficient is just the cutoff, whatever we have set, 100 hertz, 200 hertz, whatever. Or if it's dynamic, it's moving with the throttle, whatever that cutoff is. It's times 2 times pi, and then divided by the sampling frequency. So getting back to this, if I set this at, let's set this at 100 hertz. Let's go a little bit lower. All right, let's set that at 60 hertz. So we have 8K sampling rate. The motion is at 60 hertz, so this is prop wash motion. Then we are filtering it with one, make sure everybody can see this, yeah, one low pass filter, PT1 at 60 hertz. So you can see this is the D term. All these little dots, these are all the samples that the gyro is getting through 60 hertz motion. So you can see 8K is plenty of little dots. 32K is just, like, how many more little dots do you need? I mean, it's just, they're all merged together. It doesn't really, we're mapping the 60K motion just fine at 8K. Even at 4K, there's plenty of little dots to accurately map and digitalize this 60 hertz prop wash, fluctuations. So let's move this down. Watch what happens here. Specifically look at the gap between the D term. This is the actual motion. Well, the actual motion is this gyro signal here, but this is the D term reaction to this gyro signal. And then this is the filtered output. Keep your eye on this gap right here. Didn't that gap look like it got less? Now you can see at 1000 hertz, 60 hertz motion, we're mapping it. There's plenty, there's enough dots, but it's, you're pushing it. There's not a lot of, you're taking a sample every 1 millisecond for 1000, 1000 hertz is 1 millisecond. So every 1 millisecond, you're taking another sample of the quad's motion. And if it's moving real quick, you're taking those samples along it. So it's oscillating right in prop wash. But check out the gap between the two. So if I go from 1000 to 2000, again, watch that gap. Just go back and see that gap. So 2000 to 1000. Watch right there. Those got it looked like they got closer together than me, which I don't know. I haven't looked at it some more. It shouldn't do that, but it looked like it did. So I don't know what I'm missing there. But anyways, so KISS runs at 1K. You can run 1K in Betaflight too. The dynamic filter does not work at 1K. For the dynamic notch to work at 1K, you need to run 1.333 minimum. And then the dynamic notch will still work at that sampling frequency. Sure did. So I don't know if you were making him refer, or Crunk, if you were seeing that offset go back. Anyways, let's see if there's any other questions here. Just about my person. Yeah, Velocidrone. I also heard it was pretty good. I need to get honestly, I do everything on my work laptop. So that's part of it too. I don't want to load all these games and stuff on it. Yeah, harmonics and Q versus Q. Okay, so Crunk has a question. Answer my question about harmonics versus notch Q as far as latency. I think harmonics should stay at 3. Somebody's argued with me on Facebook about that. I think in general, harmonics at 3 is good. They don't save that much. So you can just see it here, right? So harmonics at 3, Q of 500. If I change down to harmonics to 2, it saves 0.1 milliseconds to go to 2 and 0.2 milliseconds to go to 1. On the same breath, look how far the third harmonic, when your gyro motion, when your when your filters are at 300 and like your primary motor noise peak is at 340. So let's move that down a little bit because this is emulating like a kind of a 50% throttle scenario here, right? So say when your primary motion or your primary motor peak is at around 200 hertz, right? That third harmonic is all the way up at 860. You know, do we have motion up there that it's doing? Probably not, but it's only 0.1 millisecond. Here's where I think it does come into play. It's this second harmonic here. When you're down, I don't know if I'll be able to show it in black box. Let's change this to, this, see if I can at least get a graph up to depict this. Yeah, it's not going to really show it. A lot of times, if you run your spectrograph in Gyro and you do this waterfall version of it, you'll see like the motor peak noise. And I don't even have, yeah, you can. The motor band is right through here actually, since the RPM notches are on it. It's actually inversed because they do so well at crushing out the motor noise. This is the second harmonic on this quad out here, and this is the octocopter actually. It's interesting on the octocopter, you actually get two motor bands, right? Because you have the sets of props in that configuration, since the top and the bottom ones. Actually, I think it was the front and the back, yeah. Because there was so much weight on the front that the back motors were so much lower in RPM, or yeah, the RPM of the motors was higher in generally in the front because there was a 5-pound weight. That the ones in the back, you actually got two bands up through here because of that differential. Usually you'll see it all kind of together because the motors are generally around the same RPM. You'll see the blob. Anyways, that aside, RPM filtering crushes it all. But a lot of times in your waterfall graphs, you'll see like this blob up here, like when you're way down at like at 0% throttle area. That's actually, I'm sorry, in this spectrograph, you'd see this blob here. I'm thinking of when you're looking at a PID toolbox, these axes are reversed, which is inconvenient. I don't know why. I wish one of them would change. But anyways, you'd see this blob here. That's where when you're down at low throttles, that second harmonic is helping you crush that out, but it's at really low throttle levels. So I would say generally keeping to 2 harmonics. I mean, you can reduce it down. I honestly, I've released some videos in the beginning saying, hey, just set that harmonic down to 1. You really don't need those other 2. That blob thing was brought up by one of the devs, and he was Chris Thompson, and he was right. And I was like, man, damn it. But yeah, I would say 2 harmonics, generally good. I mean, if you don't have the blob, go down to 1. You can see it doesn't reduce all that much latency. Obviously, if the filters are lower, you can go from 3 down to 2, it's 0.1, down to 1. You're going to 0.6, so 0.6 to 0.9, that's something. So it's 0.1 to 0.6, it's almost half, by going from 3 to 1. But on the same breath, if this is that 1, and you just take this up to 750, you can almost get there, keeping all 3 on. You'd almost have to take this up to 800. So, yeah, you can see the differences. I think the most important thing to me with this stuff is just so folks don't forget, you can go to tiny.cc/UAV tech, and everything I'm looking at is here. So I'm looking at this Excel file. It has these 2 tabs in it, so you can look at this whole scenario all by yourself and check out different filter operations there for yourself as well. All right, so 12:30, I'll probably wrap it up. I said for an hour, it's an hour and a half. Yeah, so I think generally what I do, and I evolve through stuff as well. Crunked, I generally just keep them at 3. I don't even mess with the RPM or the Q on the RPM notches. If the main thing I would do is get the low pass filters turned off in the gyro. But if you're looking for even more latency savings, then obviously the next thing would be that. Oh, look at this, Nevin Libby. Thanks, Nevin. I hope you're doing well down there. Appreciate the super chat. I appreciate the available help. So thanks, Nevin. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So Nevin Libby says, thanks, Mark, for all your videos. You're the reason why I have an idea of how to PID tune. Nice job. And hopefully this is the same Nevin. So there's a Nevin Libby. I don't know if it's the same Nevin. I don't know. I have to look at his YouTube account. But there's a Nevin Libby I know from Philadelphia area. Actually, we were childhood friends at one time, well, back when we were kids. And we haven't. It's kind of funny. We knew each other way back in the day. He moved to a different school district. And I hadn't seen him. And then all of a sudden we connected again through FPV. He's actually a physician, the Nevin Libby. If this is the same gentleman, maybe it's a different one. But the Nevin Libby I'm talking about from Philadelphia, he's actually a physician down in Philadelphia. And yeah, it was kind of interesting how we knew each other such a long time ago. Didn't talk to each other in 20 years. Yeah, same one. So how you doing, Nevin? Thank you so much for the super chat. Hope you're doing well down there with the COVID and all that kind of jazz. But yeah, it's a physician down in Philadelphia area. And Nevin, what's your you were running the how's their website? You were pulling together. What was that website you had? He's actually pulling something together for the community. If you wanted to share that in the super chat, Nevin, we can plug that a little bit. I think it was like a trade, like a parts trading, quad trading parts website between folks. I don't know if it's launched yet. I know you were working on it. I'm sure you've been busy as well. But all right, guys. Thanks again, Nevin. Go ahead and throw that up there if you're hearing this, and we'll give that a little plug. See if there's any other quick questions here. If not, I will see you guys next time. I know here in Northeast part of the United States, it's beautiful out, so get out there and go fly versus sitting here and having me ramble on. Okay, guys. I'm waiting for Nevin to throw up that link. Exchange SPV, is that what it was? Let me do that. FPV exchange. If this is gonna load. There it is. I think this is it. Yeah, I think that too. So check out this site. Yeah, preview, sign up before launch. This is the one. So yeah, check out this site. It's still in launch mode, but on here it's, I believe, where you can, put up equipment, do trades, bartering, that kind of stuff. You can rate folks on there. It's just a way. It's almost like I think there's stuff on Facebook like FPV Market. It's kind of the same thing, but it's not Facebook centric. And there's obviously some more bells and whistles because it's its own standalone website, and Facebook is, you can't just make Facebook whatever you want it to be. Here, obviously Nevin can. So Nevin's pulling that together. Check that out. Go ahead and sign up before the launch preview and give him some support. That would be great. With that, thanks everybody. Hope this was a good session, and we'll see you on the next one.